I'm all for understanding and having things more like science-based because I'm a doctor of physical therapy and it's important to have science-based, but it's also important to have pragmatic use. How can we apply this? And how can we make it useful for us? This is what we're going to go over because you're not somebody that's going out looking at all the scientific research and really trying to narrow it down. You just want to know how to use it on the trail and use it on your interval bike. You're doing different things and also use it to not feel like you're going to just fatigue and tire out. All right, back off my soapbox now. So this one is zones 1 through 5. Zone 1 being the easy. You can talk, you can recover, you can ride for forever. It's like you're going easy on a greenway. Super chill. Zone 2 is when you actually start to notice that you're doing something. Your heart rate starts to become slightly more elevated than just chilling. You can still talk conversationally, and you are working your body to a certain extent. It's not hard. It's not even moderate, but you know that you're doing something. This is your endurance zone. Zone 3 is your tempo zone. This is when you start working more than just the endurance zone. You know that you're working a little bit harder. It's moderate intensity, moderate to hard, and you couldn't stay at this level all day long. You would definitely need to have some breaks here and there, but it wouldn't be something that you're like dying as far as breathing wise. You are really understanding that you can still keep this and keep going, but it's not going to fatigue you out extremely. This is your zone 3. Zone 4, and you're kind of probably figuring out how we're going to tell what zone we're in based on these descriptions. Zone 4 is the threshold. That's whenever you are crusting from your aerobic zones into your anaerobic zones. This is when you know you're working hard. You have crested over that bubble, per se, of where you weren't necessarily breathing hard to now you're actually breathing hard. You only want to take like 2-word sentences. You are really struggling when it comes to lasting in a zone for a long period of time. Zone 4. Zone 5 is when you are sprinting almost. So it's basically the next step up in your output. And so as we look at these zones, zone 1, easy. Zone 2, you know you're working some. Zone 3 is whenever you have moderate intensity, but you're not yet breathing hard. Zone 4 is whenever you start to breathe hard, you are working hard per se. And zone 5 is sprinting. And so as we think about knowing what zone we're in, we can use these as our rate of perceived exertion and also our talk test. You also have heart rate differences in here. We'll go over heart rate more closer to the end of the video because I think it's not quite as useful if you are using this practicality-wise on the trail. It is important if you have other more hardline intentions, and that's why we'll go over it in just a little bit. So how you know you're in these different zones is that your talk test, how hard are you breathing? How much do you want to talk? And that will give you your output. Usually if you are struggling on the trail, the last thing you want to think about is, can I talk right now? Let me see. Fa la la la. Like that's the last thing you're going to do. But that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about if I was having a conversation with somebody, what would I want to say? What would I want to say to them? How would I want to say it to them? And how long would I want the sentences to be? Could I talk conversationally? If so, you're probably in zone 2 or 1. If you are starting to shorten your sentences, but not into just 2-word sentences, you just know that you need a little bit more breath in between then you're probably in zone 3. Also, caveat, the upper end of zone 3 is what we call your sweet spot. This is when you are working just shy of the threshold, but the upper end of your tempo. And that's an important important thing to note because it's an important interval or zone that you may be told to get into. This is when you start feeling like you're almost to that point where you don't want to talk very much, but you still can. And that'll give you that point. Whenever you crest over into that where you really don't want to talk as much, 2-word sentences, 1-word sentence, that's whenever you've crested over into your threshold zone. It's whenever you're really working hard in that and you're sprinting. I think that's a little bit more known. Usually the end ranges are the known thing, and then the middle ranges is where it becomes confusing. If I tell you to go like stand in the middle of a room, you're going to be unsure, you're going to have a guesstimate, and then you're going to stand there. Versus if I told you to stand on one wall versus I told you to stand on the other wall, you're going to know and understand those like edge points. You got it. That is your point. You can only go so hard. You can only go so easy. You got those points. The middle ground is where it's confusing. And so cresting over into that where you're breathing harder, where you only want to take 1 to 2-word sentences, then that's where you are working into your zone 4, your threshold zone. And then next one up is sprinting. When it comes to rate of perceived exertion in this, it's actually putting these two together is where you're going to come up with which zone you're in. Because we don't want to just rely on our breathing, because we may have other pulmonary issues, breathing issues, asthma, other things like that, that may give us a false sense of where we are in these zones, and we may not push ourselves hard enough, or we may not let ourselves come off of it as easy because we are still having so much pressure of breathing for what's happening in our lungs and our pulmonary system. Our rate of perceived exertion is where we look at how hard we are outputting. What intensity are we giving? Are we giving a easy intensity? We would call this easy. We're just trucking along. No real issues. Are we starting to work here where you feel a little bit, but it's not really anything to write home about? That's your zone 2. You still have to put in work for zone 2. It's not just riding the easy train. Zone 3 is when you're starting to work moderately. You know that you're outputting. You know that you're doing stuff, but it's not what you would call hard yet. Remember, the sweet spot is the upper end of that, where you're not quite that hard, but you're just shy of it. You know, if you push just that little bit more, then you would probably be saying that you're hard, working harder. Zone 4 is whenever you start to really output, and it's going to be hard for you to stay at this. Maybe like a couple seconds to like 8 minutes is where you want to stay in this initially. It's going to be hard for you to push yourself for that amount of period of time. And it's especially if you're new to intervals, that it's really going to test your mental fortitude to push into that. Again, sprinting, next step up, that's when you are really working very hard. There's nothing else that you're thinking about in your brain except for your output that you're doing on your bike. That is sprinting. Now, when it comes to heart rate, you can look at it in several different ways. One of the things that I find for people, or that I recommend, is doing a time trial. And this is probably not going to give you the right output initially. So you're going to have to do this time trial a couple times to get good at the time trial to get good results. And time trial is that you warm up 5-10 minutes, get your heart rate up, get it going, and then when you are ready to start ramping up, then you ramp up, you hit your watch thing to block what time you started your push, and you push for either 3 minutes at the very least to 20 minutes at the very most for this time trial. You are going to work hard in this. You're going to push. You are going to max out. You are going to make sure that you get all of your ounce of energy out for this time trial. And then you'll cool down at the end of it. Don't forget to hit your watch. This gives you your lactic threshold heart rate. This is where you plug it in and you can determine your different zones and the different percentages for it. I have a little Excel sheet that I give the ladies that are in my membership, and they just plug in that number and it gives them their ranges of output for their heart rate for those different zones 1 through 5. This will give you a more objective number to helping you with what zone you're in, and you can outlay this over top of your rate of perceived exertion and your talk test. It gives you some hard data to use. Also, if your heart rate is not responding to what zone that you're in that you think that your rate of perceived exertion is, or your talk test is in, then either A, you did your time trial incorrectly and you need to redo it, or two, it might be a sign that you need to go see the doctor, or three, you might need to give yourself some more recovery, because your rate of perceived exertion, your talk test, those are really good indicators of how your body is doing. That's why they're not as objective, because they can change a little bit. So if you've had a lot of stressful day, if you've not drinking enough and had enough electrolytes in it, if you've not ate the right things, if you've not have good sleep, you have a little 2-year-old like I do. Thankfully she's sleeping great right now. But if you've had those factors in, then the rate of perceived exertion and also your talk test will change in correspondence to that. And your heart rate might be more erratic in it and not give you, like, say that you feel that you're in zone 2 for both of those other ones, but your heart rate is super high. It might give you pause. Hey, I probably need to recover a little bit more. So I hope this helps with your ability to know what zones you're in, how to tell those things. And then next week, we are going to be going over how to actually use some of this information, how to do intervals, and how to apply it to doing it on the trail. Check that out here if it's been past a week, and it should be there. And if not, I hope that you have a fantastic day, and check out my membership if you're interested. Bye, y'all.